What is good, everyone? Welcome to KGW Sports Extra. My name is Orlando, alongside the one and only Art Edwards.
Yes.
How you doing?
Doing just fine.
What'd you think of the sports weekend?
Oh, I loved it.
Another good one, right?
Another good one.
Okay,
Yes.
There was somewhat of a classic in Corvallis,
Yes.
Oregon State versus Washington.
Yep.
The first top 10 matchup in Corvallis in more than two decades.
Yeah.
Pretty huge stakes as well.
Yeah.
Oregon State trying to stay alive in the Pac-12 championship conversation. Well, the Huskies, Washington, were trying to punch a ticket
Yes.
to Vegas for the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
Came down to the final few minutes. The Beavers weren't able to get over the hump, and they lose 22-20. So, Art, your overall thoughts on the game that transpired in Corvallis?
It was strange seeing how the two halves were so different.
Yeah.
Oregon State got down, but then in the second half, they just totally dominated the game. But, Jonathan Smith talked about the fact that they played their game.
Yeah.
And their game is to run the ball and kind of controlled passes and hang on to the ball for as long as they possibly can.
For sure.
Limit the number of offensive possessions the other team has. Well, they do that, but the challenge, I think, for them is that once they get behind by two scores, it's a problem for them.
It's a lot to come
is.
back from, just based on the style of play that you mentioned, because they nailed it.
They did.
I mean, and also you held Michael Penix Jr. to under 200 yards passing.
Yeah, his worst
You do
game
that, his worst game of the year, and I think the most or least inefficient game that he's had in like 2 years.
Yes.
So like they did the job,
absolutely,
and it still wasn't enough.
No, I think it's just it is their style of play. They're going to run 5, 6, 7 minutes off the clock, but that means that you're only going to get the ball maybe twice in a quarter. So you don't really have a lot of opportunities, and you can't afford to turn it over. And they did have some turnovers. You can't afford to make any kind of mistake really if that's the kind of game that you play. They had the snap that went over the punter's head for a safety, and ultimately it was a 2-point game.
Right.
So it makes it really difficult. The margin of error is not very large. When it's somebody who's got a dynamic offense that scores quickly,
for sure.
Well, you can get behind by a little bit and not worry about it quite as much.
Yeah, because I mean, they shut out the Huskies in the second half.
Yes.
But as you mentioned, you turned the ball over 3 times.
Yeah.
It's very easy to point out the mistakes that the Beavers made.
Yes.
And say, they lost.
Right. They're just, I said there is no margin of error for them. They're going to do what they do, and they do it really well. And they made the comeback, and they got really close. But in the end, the mistakes kind of got them, and that really was what did them in. But man, they played really well, but weather-wise, it was a miserable day.
Oh, it was ugly. I mean, the way you looked at me just now, I'm having flashbacks of being on the field. And photographer Richard Gordon making fun of me as I was wringing out all my equipment. The water's dripping out because, I mean, the rain there was just relentless the entire time. And it kind of set up nicely for the Beavers and what they like to do as well. And Damian Martinez was sensational.
Oh, he was.
Running over the century mark yet again. A couple of touchdowns in that game. But it was just they couldn't make that final play on that final drive to keep it going, get them into field goal range or go for a touchdown. And so they lose their 3rd game of the season, all of which have been by 3 points or less.
Yes.
How heartbreaking is that for the Beavers, who fall to 8-3 and know, like, they're a play away here, a play away there. You go back to the Washington State game. You talk about this one. Just so many opportunities there. The Arizona game. Where they're right there. They're so close to being in that championship discussion.
I feel like it's got to be really hard on them because they know that they really are good enough to be able to get this done. And it's just a couple of plays in each game. Washington State, they got down by 14 in the first quarter. And now they've got to try that uphill battle to get back into the game. And they got it close, but just not quite enough. They needed another 5 minutes in that game.
For sure.
They just needed it to be a little longer. And so it's got to be really tough for them because they had such the great season last year. And this year, they may not get to the same number of wins as what they had last year. So I'm sure that kind of weighs heavily on them.
Because of that upward trajectory where every year they were just compiling more wins and more wins. So now there is still something to play for, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's first talk about their rivals, the Oregon Ducks, who win 49-13 against Arizona State. You and I sat up here and said, oh, this could be a trap game. They haven't played well when they go to Tempe. They lost the last 2 at Arizona State. Well, they quickly dismissed that discussion.
Yeah, they certainly did. I saw something about how they hadn't won in Tempe in November. Ever.
In November,
In November, and it's really been a long time, and they have a hard time there. But, what did it take about 4 minutes?
The opening drive?
Opening drive, yeah. And then, 4 minutes of clock time, and it's done. It was over quickly.
So it was the Bo Nix show. The Heisman Trophy campaign continues. And this one was nice from a stats perspective.
Sure.
He throws 6 touchdowns, all in the first half, guiding the Ducks to 6 straight drives of touchdowns that really just put this game away. But your thoughts on what Bo Nix has been able to do, especially after this game?
Well, it's amazing what he's been able to do. I mean, he is so consistent. It's like every single week we're talking about 400 yards passing, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns.
Just the king of efficiency.
Absolutely. It's not flashy like some guys who are out there.
For sure.
But it never wavers. It's always that same really high level.
And he's leading this team to different heights. So one more question on the Bo Nix for Heisman campaign.
Yes.
We were looking at the Vegas odds, and Bo Nix is now the favorite for the Heisman Trophy by a slight margin.
Yes.
Your thoughts on his position now and who could potentially take that spot from him?
Well, I think he should be on top, but I think that he has got a Jaden Daniels problem from LSU because 2 things with LSU. One, they're leaving him in the game a long time.
Yeah.
He had 8 touchdowns, like 6 touchdown passes, 2 rushing touchdowns.
That's eye-popping stuff.
But he played until 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they won that game 50-something to 16.
Yeah.
So he didn't need to be playing, but they left him in there. The other thing with LSU is they've played a number of really close games where they needed every single touchdown he scored. So they aren't as good. They aren't nearly the team that Oregon is. So he gets a little bit more playing time. I mean, Bo Nix, it's like half the games he's played one series in the third quarter, and that's it. He could have thrown 8 or 10 touchdown passes in that game on Saturday if they had left him in.
That's going to be interesting to see how they approach this game against Oregon State. Obviously, you just got to win.
Yes.
But if for some reason this becomes a lopsided affair, do they pad those stats?
Yeah. You know what? Maybe they do. I mean, maybe they'll look at it and say, hey, you know what? We could use some style points, not only for Bo, to get him the Heisman, but also in terms of the college football playoff. Because there are 3 or 4 teams that are one-loss teams, and that they're just aching to get Alabama back in there. That committee has got to want Alabama in there, and they're sitting there. Louisville only has 1 loss. I think Missouri only has 1 loss. So there are a bunch of those one-loss teams, and I think maybe some style points at some point.
And there will be a one-loss team in the Big Ten.
Yes, there will be. Michigan and Ohio State go at it on Saturday. So. Yes, it's going to be, it'll be interesting to see what happens, to see what Oregon decides to do, how they play it. If they get a chance to be way ahead of somebody early, do they just keep pushing down on the gas?
So Oregon now 10-1 on the season. And still, all of their dreams, everything they have ever wanted to do is still in front of them. But they've got to beat Oregon State now, setting the stage for the rivalry game. Because in a funky way, Arizona is looming.
They are.
So if Oregon has a bad day at the office and Oregon State pulls off the upset, because Vegas says it would be an upset. 14-point favorites. Oregon is at Autzen Stadium Friday, 5:30. Okay, now with that said, if Oregon State were to win this game, that could knock Oregon out of the Pac-12 championship game altogether because Arizona would have a tiebreaker if that happened and Arizona beat Arizona State in rivalry week. So I'm curious to see what you think about this rivalry game. What are you looking forward to in Oregon versus Oregon State?
You know what? They're all important. They're always important. There's a lot of pride on the line. But in terms of what it means for whether or not you advance through your season, this might be the most important one that we've seen in a long time. Oregon State has a chance to really upend Oregon's season, and this might be the last one for a while.
For sure.
That they would love nothing more than to be able to knock Oregon right off that pedestal and make their season not as meaningful as it could be.
I love it that there's more than just state bragging rights, because it's always personal. They want to win that game. There are a couple of games on the schedule where it's must-wins regardless of what the records are. But this one actually has some real stakes involved here.
Yes, it does.
With trying to get to the Pac-12 championship game and ultimately avenge that one loss to UW. And if they do that, well, they've got a clear path to the CFP.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it's still going to be, the CFP is going to be a mess. I mean, Florida State's got a problem now.
With their injury.
Right, with their quarterback being injured. The backup played pretty well, and he's got some experience. He's not a guy coming in with nothing. But, they're going to be hard-pressed, I think, to beat Louisville to win the ACC, and it's going to be tough on them. So it might open up another slot in there. I think that Michigan, with all the stuff that's going on, if Michigan loses to Ohio State, I think that ends it for them. I don't think that they would be a one-loss team that the committee would be that comfortable. They say, oh yeah, we're not worried about the sign stealing stuff, but I think maybe that's sort of in the back of everybody's mind, and they'd be wondering, okay, you know what, we have some other options here. Let's pick one of those other ones.
Oh, that's going to be super interesting.
It is.
And Oregon could be the team that unlocks all this chaos around who gets in to that 4-team playoff.
Yes.
So like we said, they've got to take care of business. And I've been asking every Ducks fan, every person I know about this, and that's, do you think that this Oregon team feels different than the Oregon teams of the past? Because I say that in asking you because one, Novembers have just been a nightmare for them. They've found a way to lose games. They've passed that test, especially the one in Tempe, where that was viewed as a trap game. And just having to play this well late in the year, they are playing their best football right now.
Yeah. Even when they had, when it was Marcus Mariota, they always struggled a little bit in November. They always had a game where they either lost or they had some trouble with it. I was working here when they played Auburn for the national championship, and again, it felt like they were they were one-sided. They had a great offense, but maybe the defense was a little bit lacking. The defense didn't necessarily give up a lot of, they gave up a lot of yards, but they were able, it was sort of they bend and don't break, and the offense could just outscore everyone. So I felt that's the way it was for both of those national championship games. This time, I look at it and I say, you know what, this defense might just shut somebody down. They might just shut someone down, and then the offense won't have to do as much, but the offense will do a lot.
I believe statistically, them and Georgia are the only two teams in the top 10 that have both top 10 offenses and top 10 defenses. And the defense is giving up about 16 points per game. That would put you 10th in college football right now. So the defense is holding up its end of the bargain, and that's something that you and I had talked about and being like, well, this is probably their weakness. No, they've answered the call. The other question at the beginning of the year was, what would their offensive line be without all of their veterans that they had? This was kind of a new offensive line, even though they had guys that had experience, but this was their turn to kind of be in those starting roles or dominant roles, and man, have they torn it up. Allowing just 5 sacks all season, which is the best in all of college football. Like, they're just checking a lot of these boxes, and I don't think a lot of teams would want to face them right now.
No, I don't think so. They're playing so well on offense, and they're balanced. Offense and defense, both of them playing at a really high level. They're a lot more balanced than they have been in the past. In the past, it always felt like to me that they had to go out and score a whole bunch of points. I think when they played Auburn for the national title, it was a close game, but it was a low-scoring game. It was like 19-17 or something like that. So it was a low-scoring game. So they couldn't run out there, get out there and run away and hide. And then Ohio State just was physically kind of overmatched them a little bit in that game. So this year it does feel different. It feels like they are more balanced, and they're both playing at a really high level.
Looking forward to that rivalry game. Head coach Dan Lanning called it their Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big deal.
That is.
I love when I hear head coaches accept and embrace that this is a big game.
None of this, it's just any other game. No, it's not.
It's a game they want to win, especially after what happened last year and the Beavs having their number.
Absolutely.
So that sets up for quite the rivalry game, and we'll talk about that the next time right here on KGW Sports Extra.